Divine approval and joy over your perseverance is not something that happens loudly or with sudden fireworks. It moves quietly through moments you almost overlooked, through days when you questioned whether continuing was worth it, and through nights when your strength was tested in silence. What makes this approval powerful is not that it comes after perfection, but that it comes because you chose to stay standing while carrying weight that was never meant to crush you. You showed up when motivation was gone, you kept your heart open when disappointment tried to harden it, and you learned how to breathe through pressure instead of running from it. That perseverance was noticed long before you became aware of it, because heaven measures effort differently than the world does. While others may have only seen pauses, delays, or setbacks, what was seen above was consistency, restraint, and faith under strain. There were moments when you felt like nothing was moving, when prayers felt like echoes and progress felt invisible, yet those were the exact moments when your perseverance carried the most meaning. Perseverance is not loud endurance, it is quiet commitment, it is choosing not to abandon yourself when outcomes are uncertain. Every time you resisted the urge to quit, complain, or compromise who you are, something was recorded in your favor. Even the days when you barely made it through still counted, because perseverance does not require strength, it requires presence. You stayed present in your responsibility, in your integrity, and in your belief that something greater was guiding you even when clarity was missing. Divine joy comes from seeing you grow without losing your softness. You were pressured, yet you did not become cruel. You were delayed, yet you did not become bitter. You were misunderstood, yet you did not lose your sense of self. That balance is rare, and it is deeply valued. Perseverance shaped your character more than comfort ever could, and that shaping is what brought approval. You learned patience without becoming passive, resilience without becoming rigid, and faith without becoming blind. Those qualities were developed through endurance, not ease. There were tests disguised as ordinary days, and you passed them by simply staying aligned with what felt right instead of what felt easy. Perseverance showed in how you responded rather than reacted, in how you chose growth over escape, and in how you trusted timing even when it tested your nerves. You did not demand instant results, and you did not force doors that were not ready to open. That restraint is a form of wisdom, and wisdom brings joy because it shows readiness for greater responsibility. When approval comes, it is not about rewarding pain, it is about honoring transformation. You are not being acknowledged for suffering, you are being acknowledged for who you became while enduring. Your perseverance refined your discernment, sharpened your intuition, and strengthened your ability to stand alone without feeling abandoned. You learned how to listen inwardly, how to move without external validation, and how to remain steady when circumstances tried to sway you. That steadiness is what brings trust, and trust brings approval. Even the moments you thought you failed were part of the perseverance, because you returned instead of disappearing. You recalibrated instead of quitting, you learned instead of blaming, and you kept your heart teachable instead of defensive. That willingness to continue evolving is what separates perseverance from stubbornness. You were not just enduring time, you were allowing yourself to be shaped by it. Divine joy also comes from watching you choose integrity when shortcuts were available. Perseverance does not only show up in waiting, it shows up in restraint. You resisted becoming someone you are not just to move faster, and that decision preserved your alignment. You stayed true to your values when it would have been easier to abandon them for temporary relief. That kind of perseverance protects long-term purpose, and it signals readiness for what requires trust. There is a difference between pushing and persevering, and you learned it through experience. You stopped forcing outcomes and started trusting process. You allowed yourself to rest without giving up, to pause without retreating, and to reflect without self-judgment. That maturity is a sign of growth, and growth brings joy because it shows you are no longer driven by fear or desperation. Perseverance also showed in how you treated yourself during uncertainty. Instead of self-condemnation, you chose compassion. Instead of comparison, you chose focus. Instead of panic, you chose patience. Those internal choices matter just as much as external actions. They kept your spirit intact while everything else was shifting. Divine approval does not rush, it arrives when alignment and endurance meet. You did not give up on yourself, and that decision echoed far beyond what you could see. Every step forward, even the small ones, carried weight. Every moment you chose faith over frustration strengthened your foundation. You are being acknowledged not because the journey was hard, but because you stayed true while walking it, because perseverance taught you how to stand steady in uncertainty, how to move with purpose without knowing every detail, and how to trust that what is unfolding has meaning even when the path is not yet fully revealed. Unseen sacrifices acknowledged by heaven are the ones that never received applause, never earned public recognition, and never came with reassurance that they mattered. Yet they carried the deepest weight. These sacrifices were made in private moments, in decisions no one else knew you faced, in paths you chose not to take even though they promised comfort, attention, or ease. You gave up versions of yourself that no longer aligned with who you were becoming, and that kind of sacrifice is rarely understood by others. It meant releasing habits that once soothed you, distancing yourself from people who felt familiar but draining, and walking away from opportunities that conflicted with your inner truth. No one clapped when you chose discipline over desire, or integrity over approval, but those choices shaped you in ways that cannot be undone. Some sacrifices were emotional, like holding your tongue when you wanted to defend yourself, choosing peace instead of proving a point, or forgiving without receiving an apology. You carried misunderstandings quietly because you knew clarity would come later. You allowed others to misjudge you because correcting them would have cost you your alignment. Those moments felt unfair, and at times they felt lonely, but they were acts of maturity and trust. Heaven notices when you choose restraint instead of retaliation, when you protect your spirit instead of feeding your ego. Other sacrifices were relational, letting go of connections that once felt essential. You didn't leave because you stopped caring, you left because staying required you to abandon yourself. You mourned those losses silently, questioning whether you were doing the right thing, yet you still honored your inner knowing. Walking alone for a season was not your preference, but it was necessary for your growth. You chose isolation over misalignment, even when it meant enduring quiet nights and unanswered messages. There were sacrifices of time and energy, moments when you poured into responsibilities without immediate return. You showed up consistently, even when results were delayed, even when appreciation was absent. You invested effort into healing, learning, and rebuilding while others assumed nothing was happening. Progress was internal before it ever became visible, and that internal work required patience that few could see. Heaven acknowledges the hours spent recalibrating your mindset, unlearning harmful patterns, and choosing better responses. Financial and practical sacrifices were part of the journey too. You chose stability over impulse, preparation over indulgence, and long-term vision over short-term pleasure. You said no to things that others freely enjoyed because you were guided by a deeper purpose. That restraint was not driven by fear, but by foresight. You trusted that what you were preserving would serve you later, even when temptation whispered otherwise. Some sacrifices involved carrying burdens that were not yours alone. You held space for others, supported them through confusion, and remained steady while they found their footing. You absorbed emotional weight without complaint, not because you were obligated, but because compassion guided you. That strength came at a cost, and there were days when you felt depleted, yet you continued to give without losing your humanity. Heaven sees the way you protected others without neglecting your values. You also sacrificed old identities, releasing labels that once defined you but no longer fit. Growth required you to outgrow versions of yourself that felt safe. Letting go of those identities felt like loss, even though it was necessary. You questioned who you were becoming, standing in uncertainty while everything familiar dissolved. That vulnerability was a sacrifice in itself, because it required trust in something unseen. There were moments when you sacrificed certainty. You moved forward without guarantees, guided only by intuition and faith. You trusted timing instead of forcing outcomes, even when waiting tested your nerves. That choice to surrender control was not weakness, it was alignment. Heaven honors trust that is practiced without proof. Even your silence was a sacrifice. You didn't always speak your pain, not because it wasn't real, but because you were learning discernment. You chose when to be quiet and when to be open, protecting your energy instead of explaining yourself endlessly. That silence preserved your strength, though it often felt misunderstood. Unseen sacrifices accumulate meaning. They shape your character, refine your spirit, and prepare you for responsibilities that require depth and wisdom. You were being prepared in ways that comfort never could have taught you. Each sacrifice carved space within you, making room for clarity, resilience, and discernment. Acknowledgement does not always come when the sacrifice is made, it comes when the season shifts. Heaven does not overlook quiet obedience or private discipline. What you gave up was not wasted, it was transformed into strength, alignment, and readiness. The weight you carried without complaint, the choices you made without witnesses, and the losses you accepted without bitterness all contributed to who you are now, and those unseen sacrifices are recognized not because they were painful, but because they were purposeful, because they were made with intention, humility, and trust, because they aligned you with a path that required depth, patience, and inner strength beyond what most are willing to cultivate, because what you released created space for what is meant to arrive, and that space was prepared through quiet courage and unseen devotion that continues to echo beyond the moment you made those choices. Present moment confirmation and spiritual alignment arrive quietly, often felt before they are understood, settling into your awareness as a sense of calm that doesn't need explanation. This moment is not demanding proof, urgency, or performance, it is simply asking you to notice where you are right now and how different it feels compared to where you once stood. Alignment does not always announce itself with dramatic change, sometimes it shows up as relief, as clarity, as the absence of inner conflict that once drained you. You may notice that decisions feel easier, that your reactions are softer, that your intuition speaks without strain. These are confirmations that you are standing where you are meant to be, even if the destination is still forming. Spiritual alignment is less about perfection and more about coherence. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions are beginning to move in the same direction instead of pulling against each other. You no longer feel the need to convince yourself that something is right, your body responds before your mind questions it. The constant internal debate that once exhausted you has quieted, replaced by a steady sense of knowing. That knowing does not shout, it reassures. It doesn't rush you forward, it anchors you in the now, reminding you that this moment holds everything you need to take the next step. Confirmation in the present moment often comes through subtle shifts. You may notice repeated signs, conversations that answer questions you didn't speak aloud, or timing that aligns in ways that feel intentional. These are not coincidences, they are reflections of alignment. When you are aligned, you are receptive, and when you are receptive, guidance flows more easily. You begin to recognize what resonates and what doesn't without overanalyzing it. Your discernment sharpens not through effort, but through attunement. There is also a sense of release that accompanies alignment. You stop trying to control outcomes that were never yours to manage. You trust that what is unfolding does not require force. This trust allows you to be present instead of anxious about what comes next. Being present does not mean being passive, it means acting from clarity rather than fear. Your actions feel purposeful, even when they are small, because they come from a grounded place. Present moment confirmation reminds you that you are supported now, not someday. It dissolves the idea that fulfillment exists only in the future. You begin to see that alignment is experienced in how you move through your day, how you treat yourself, how you respond to challenges. There is less resistance and more flow. Even obstacles feel different, they no longer threaten your sense of direction, they simply refine it. Alignment also deepens your connection to your inner voice. You trust yourself more because you have evidence of what happens when you listen. Past experiences taught you the cost of ignoring that voice, and present confirmation shows you the peace that comes from honoring it. You no longer seek constant validation because your internal compass feels reliable. This self-trust creates stability, allowing you to remain centered even when external circumstances fluctuate. You may notice that old patterns no longer fit. Behaviors that once felt automatic now feel foreign. This is not loss, it is alignment recalibrating your habits. You are becoming more intentional, choosing responses instead of reacting impulsively. This shift happens naturally when you are aligned, because your nervous system recognizes safety in authenticity. You don't have to perform or protect yourself in the same ways anymore. Spiritual alignment brings a sense of timing that cannot be forced. You understand when to move and when to wait, not because of logic, but because of inner resonance. Waiting no longer feels like stagnation, it feels like preparation. Moving no longer feels like risk, it feels like expression. This rhythm keeps you grounded in the present, where clarity is available. Confirmation also appears through peace with what is unfinished. You stop measuring your worth by how much you have accomplished and start honoring the process you are in. This acceptance does not dull ambition, it refines it. You aim from alignment rather than insecurity. Goals become extensions of who you are, not attempts to prove something. In this present moment, alignment is teaching you how to listen more than you speak, how to feel more than you analyze. You are learning to recognize guidance through sensation, emotion, and intuition. Your body becomes an instrument of awareness, responding to truth with ease and to misalignment with discomfort. This feedback keeps you honest with yourself. Present moment confirmation is also a reminder that you are not late. Everything you needed to experience has prepared you for this exact awareness. There is no rush to catch up, no pressure to accelerate beyond what feels right. Alignment honors pacing. It allows growth to unfold organically, without comparison. You may sense gratitude emerging without a specific reason. This is alignment settling in. Gratitude without cause signals that your inner world is stabilizing. You are no longer searching for something to fix you, you are recognizing what is already whole. This recognition strengthens your connection to the present, where peace is accessible. As you remain attentive to this moment, alignment continues to deepen. You become more responsive to subtle guidance, more comfortable with uncertainty, more confident in your ability to navigate change. Confirmation does not require external validation when internal coherence is strong. You are here, aware, grounded, and receptive, and that awareness itself is the sign, the quiet acknowledgement that you are exactly where you need to be, aligned with what is unfolding, attuned to the present, and moving forward without resistance as trust replaces urgency and clarity continues to emerge through stillness and attention.